Welcome to today's program, a part of the TEENtastic Tuesday series. First, I'd like to introduce myself and my colleague. My name is Vincent Vincy Zalkind of the North Hollywood branch, and I am here with Emily Meehan of the Palms Rancho Park branch. And we would like to thank the Library Foundation for making this program possible. Now, I'll introduce our guest. Today's author is comic creator Stan Stanley. You might know her from her webcomics, Friendly Hostility, her online journal comic Stananigans, and her most recent work, The Hazards of Love, which is set to release later this month on March 30th. Thank you for joining us, Stanley.
My pleasure. Hi.
Hi there. All right. So we'll start, and if there's any questions from the audience, they can leave them in our chat. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your new book, The Hazards of Love?
Sure. So my book, The Hazards of Love, is about Amparo, who, after their latest suspension from school, realizes they need to shape up and, make their mom and their abuela proud. And also it'll help them have a chance with their incredibly nerdy goody two-shoes crush, Iolanthe. But changing into a better person is hard. So when a talking cat shows up to offer a really easy solution, Amparo makes a mistake, and it's too good to be true. The cat steals Amparo's name and shape and sends Amparo to this surreal place called Bright World, which is full of monstrous creatures that are interested in eating either Amparo's meat or their memories, sometimes both. So there's Amparo, nameless and trapped, and the story is about how they struggle to find their way back home. While on the other side, Iolanthe has started realizing that something is off about the new Amparo, and she starts looking into why they're acting a little strange. So that's the book. As for me, I grew up in Mexico. I've been living in NYC for about a decade now. I'm queer. I'm known for a large collection of bones and teeth. I was supposed to be a scientist, but I have always been drawing comics when I am supposed to be doing work. And you know what? At this point, I'm like, yeah, that's who I am. So there, did that work for an intro?
Most definitely, yeah.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so I love, Vincey and I both read The Hazards of Love, obviously. We both loved it. We loved it. And the art is amazing. And you can tell that it's just really rich with, cultural and artistic influences, but your style is very, very unique. And it's like all you. So we just absolutely loved it. And you include a page on the back of the book, like the very back, with some like historical figures and artists and films that influenced the art and some of the characters. Could you talk a little bit about the influences, and is there anything else that you want to credit?
I feel like if I credited everything, we'd just be here forever, right? But I will say, so I threw that page in because I wanted to make it easy to find things based on what someone might have liked about Hazards of Love. So like if you like the horror, I have a list of recommendations for a bunch of old gothic horror movies from Mexico that they're cheesy, but like they get across the same sort of very spooky vibe that Hazards has, hopefully. If you liked the aesthetic, here are some surrealist artists. And if you want to know some historical figures that made me feel less alone when I was growing up, well, here we go,
Yeah, and similarly to that question, on your website, you've mentioned, I'm quoting, early 90s Sunday morning Canal de las Estrellas programming as an inspiration for some character design, along with your childhood in Mexico. And are there any other parts of this comic that are inspired by like your own life?
Um, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly one thing, because I'm a big fan of the mosaic theory of writing, right? In this case, like my life is a vase, and I want to make a mosaic. So I smash the vase and I choose the things I think will fit into the mosaic to make the picture I want. And when that's done, no one should be able to see the original vase. It's still there. It's still an integral part of the story, but the mosaic stands on its own and is its own thing, you know? So like in Hazards, I can point to like the architecture, this one building that was on like my drive home, or like the orange juice kiosk. The uniforms at Mimi's are based on the uniforms of this very tourist trap place that we had called El Pueblito Mexicano. It was supposed to be like this old-timey Mexican restaurant, but it was so cheesy and just very clearly no one wanted to be working there. Um, but, you know, got to make money somehow. So lots of little pieces of my life and my experience made it there, you know?
Sure. And let me see if I can pull this up here and have it on camera. I noticed that issue 6 has a cover art reminiscent of the Frida Kahlo painting, The Two Fridas. Are any of the other issue covers based on famous works of art?
I'm so pleased you spotted that. Yeah, most of them are actually. A few aren't, but most of them are actually specifically based on works by female surrealist artists. The Two Fridas is the most obvious, I think, in that it's a nod to Frida Kahlo. But I've got covers inspired by the works of Remedios Varo, Leonor Fini, Leonora Carrington, Maria Izquierdo, and they're just, so these artists were really important to me because when I first saw their work, it was like a little light going on that I could just draw weird things and didn't have to temper that and could just do what my imagination wanted. At the time, I felt like everything in comics, and I say at the time, I was like a kid here, but it was like funny papers or superheroes. And I just wanted to get weird with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, we spotted that when we were talking about the questions we were going to ask, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, it's Frida Kahlo!" And so,
yeah, I started
delighted.
thinking, like, oh, am I missing something now? Like, I'm going back through them and like, what am I missing?
Yeah,
I'm so glad you liked it.
Yeah, it was great. Could you talk a bit about the storyline for the comic, and how did you create the bright world, its citizens, and all like the crazy twists and turns that take place within it?
Well, let's be honest. A lot of my ideas come from spite, irritation, anger, all this negative stuff, right? I was really tired of reading about fantasy worlds where the forest all looked the same. That's kind of like how I kept seeing it, like, oh, it's another fantasy world where all the trees are conifers, or maybe deciduous if they're feeling fancy. But like, I grew up in the desert technically, but like the forest I was used to like visiting and traveling were a lot more colorful, were a lot more interesting to me than just everything I kept seeing in like Lord of the Rings and every knockoff since, you know? And I won't get too serious here, but I have to touch on how I was really mad. I've been living in the US for a little bit longer than I lived in Mexico now. And I was really impacted and upset about the fact that Black and brown teens are not allowed to make dumb mistakes without being punished for it in a way that white teens aren't, that even white adults aren't, right? And it grew from that because, okay, I know what I want to do. I want to write a story where a queer brown teen makes a dumb mistake, gets punished for it, but that's not their end. They find out that their mistake doesn't make them a bad person, that in fact there are much worse things out there. and they end up having adventures and learning about themselves, and maybe they get to kiss a cute girl. Who knows? No spoilers. But so even though it started from anger and spite, what has actually fueled it has just been love. I love my characters. I love this story, and it has so much that I wanted to talk about, and so many things I would have wanted to read in the story when I was younger, right?
I love that, and I love just knowing that you wanted to give that point of view and put that out there. So I know that this started off as a webcomic, and each issue is released page by page separately. How far in advance do you create each issue to be released on your website? And do you enjoy or prefer creating like installments, or is it easier to make like a story all at once?
So I'm gonna reject this binary and say, so like I started with a skeleton for the whole thing, knowing the basics, right? Then you start, adding muscles to it. Like, I want to have this scene, or I want to introduce this character. And you refine it more and more, bits of dialogue, ideas for a cover. And then in the end, you slap some skin on there and you've got a vertebrate organism of some kind. This is a weird metaphor, but go with me on it. My point is the story is done, but like the writing for the individual issues gets refined and finished about a month before I actually start putting them on the website. And I think it's better that way. It keeps me engaged and with the story, and like, this is a little weird, but it gives me a way to keep it fresh and surprising, even for myself.
Awesome. Yeah. And so because it is still a webcomic, that is, it has been published, the first part in print, which is great, but it is still going on. It's far from over, and you're still putting issues up on your site. So do you have an ending in mind? And no spoilers, but do you want to give your readers any teasers for what's to come?
You could do that, I think. Let me try and see if I can avoid spoilers. I'm really bad at avoiding spoilers. I'm really bad at keeping secrets. I'm surprised I've managed so far. Anyway, so yes, I have the ending planned. It's 3 arcs, and we're a little past the halfway point if you're following the comic on its website, thehazardsoflove.com. Okay, so no spoilers. Arc 2 is all about our protagonist learning more about the world they're in and the beings that are there with them in that world. And it ends with this confrontation that changes everything for them and carries us into Arc 3 and their journey home.
I'm so excited to keep reading more, and I'm looking forward to Arc 3. This is exciting. So with it being online, it's normally in black and white. What was the process like taking it into full color?
Oof. So I didn't start off thinking the comic would go into full color. So the first pages weren't really designed to be colored in. And basically I would draw it, scan it, and post it. Because I mostly worked analog. And I had to learn to color digitally, which was new and thus terrifying. I really have to credit my first editor, Hazel Newlevant, who helped me through those growing pains. Since they're an artist themselves, they'd point out where I could learn a little more or what I could change to sort of basically educate myself about coloring. And that was incredibly helpful. And so now I do the entire thing digitally, which makes a huge difference and is going to make coloring the whole thing go so much faster, hopefully.
It does look beautiful. I love, yeah, the coloring is so vibrant. Like and against like the black kind of backdrop too, which I honestly haven't seen a lot of comics do, is just really, I don't know, it's really striking and really cool. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
If I can jump in for 1 second, Emily, yeah. That I had a page, just like a spread bookmarked of some of the more like horror aspects, and the coloring in it, the darkness and the reds. It is a treat to read.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's really sweet. And I'm getting better at accepting compliments, so thank you. But I'm still really excited and glad you like it. Thank you.
All right. So now just kind of to move on to general writing and drawing questions. So in your writing process, what do you do when you get writer's block? Do you get writer's block? What are some different techniques you employ to make sure it doesn't happen?
So I do get writer's block. I think all writers get writer's block. There's crying. There's lying on the floor about it. There's staring at the page and hoping that somehow it'll resolve into something that you're like, okay, that works, without you actually having to type or think about it. These have limited success. Oftentimes, so what actually works is ignoring it for a while. And this is painful at times because I want to think about it. I want to like worry at it, like chewing on gristle or whatever. But I know I should leave it, just leave it for a while. Let it breathe. Let myself go get some fresh air, some fresh ideas, something. Try not to think about it. And then eventually come back and poke it until it behaves. It sounds a little feral, but that's who I am as a person.
Whatever works.
Yeah, also, that's such a cool way to describe it.
Yeah.
So you had touched earlier on the types of stories you wanted to tell and what made you want to tell them. What specifically, if there is a specific reason, was it that made you want to create comics?
Okay, so I drew and I wrote as far as I can remember. But they're separate interests, and they ended up combining because at the end of the day, I was kind of a frustrated movie director. In that I wanted to see these stories play out in a very specific way. And I say frustrated movie director, nothing was stopping me at the time except the fact that this was like in the first grade. So grain of salt here. But like, I remember I wrote a play about like the pets in an animal shelter. And I spent the whole day like finishing my schoolwork early so that I could work on the costuming for this. They're making it out of paper and cutting out and carefully like taping it together, whatever, like bracelets or like dog ears or something. I basically worked on that that entire day. And I don't know, the teacher was like, oh, what a good idea. The class can do this at the end of the day. It's a nice creative bonding thing, a little 5-minute play, and the children will enjoy this. Instead, I was incredibly disappointed by the other first graders' lack of commitment to their roles. I think I cried, which isn't fair and makes me sound like a bit of a jerk here. But, you know, so clearly flesh people couldn't be trusted to portray the beauty of my first graders' ideas. So I turned to comics. It kind of made sense as like the ideal medium where I had my story, but I can also show you the face the character makes when they say this. I can show you how Iolanthi's shoulders slump or like things like that, you know?
That was great. Thank you.
Sounds exactly like the kind of thing I would have thought of as a kid. It's like, how do I put on a play with animals?
I don't remember what it was about. I just remember like the experience of being like, finally, all right, you all have your copies of my play to read because the first grade teacher Xeroxed them and handed you copies. All of you are reading so poorly. Why aren't you committing to your roles? Where is the pathos?
So basically comics because you have the the utmost control.
A little bit, yeah.
That's great. So what are some of your favorite writers or artists today or in the past? And what is it about their work that draws you to them?
So I'm glad that you said current, because otherwise to pick like all-time favorites, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Though I would say Octavia Butler's short story collection, Blood Child, like impacted me so hard. I love the rest of her work, but that short story collection and the eponymous short story, just, amazing. Currently, in terms of like writing, I love Carmen Maria Machado's collections, of course. Someone recently was like, everybody says Carmen Maria Machado, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to say it too. Who's going to stop me? I like Malka Older's work and her brother Daniel Jose Older's work. It's really good. I've also really enjoyed Anne Leckie's Imperial Ratched trilogy, which is like this sci-fi story about ship's AI who goes on a revenge quest. I love that. Let's see. In terms of comics, I know I mentioned Hazel Newlevant earlier as like my first editor, but also they wrote some really cool memoirs and stories, Sugartown and No Ivy League, which are pretty fantastic. Let's see. Petra Nordlands is an artist who, one, is an amazing artist, and two, is writing one of the best, funnest, yeah, okay, that's how that goes, stories I've read in a while. Online, it's called Tiger, and it's this really cool webcomic about, it's got ships, and it's about a nerdy scientist who loves studying sponges, but since she's royalty, she's expected to be a proper sort of queen, and instead, so she steals her brother's identity and his ship and goes sailing to ostensibly find and discover new sponges in the sea, and obviously shenanigans and old gods ensue. And so the common thread between all these things, I like new takes on old concepts, and I like new concepts with old friends, is kind of like how I'm describing it. So the latter point is like, I remember one of the cheesy horror films I loved was El Vampiro, which is, it's just Dracula in Mexico. That's it. It's not really creative. It's got a few flexes here and there, but it's not a unique story. But like I was like, oh, that's so cool. It's Dracula in Mexico. And I like sat through the 20-minute intro sequence where you just watch a funeral from afar. It's not a good movie, but but I watched it anyway, gosh darn it.
I mean, I'll watch anything with Dracula. Like,
Right?
Drac's a big staple in my household, so.
I admire that.
Do you have any advice for young aspiring writers or artists?
I'm like, how long do we have? I've got the four big ones, and we'll go through them. I won't linger too long, right? One, perfect is the enemy of finished. You are going to look at the things you do. You are going to see it full of mistakes, sometimes not immediately. Sometimes it'll be 2 weeks after, and you'll go, oh my God, I can't believe I showed anyone this. You finished it. That's all that matters. If you keep trying to make the perfect thing, you will never finish, and it will just irritate you that you have nothing to show for your hard work. Also, at the end of the day, no one will care about the tiny mistakes that much. Speaking of tiny mistakes, number two, editing is important. I know it can be super stressful to look or have a friend look at your finished work with the aim to like find the parts where you could polish it up. And you will want to lie on the floor and never make eye contact with them again. But after all is said and done, you'll be glad you did, because the fact that they saw it and that you polished it up meant that no one else had to see it. Number 3, draw and write what makes you happy, because otherwise you'll just be bored while working at something that's supposed to be fun. And what's the point of that, you know? Finally, possibly most important, mouthwash and dental floss. I am dead serious. Your generation and mine are way too stressed out all the time, and that results in poor dental health. So your choice is mouthwash now or root canals later. They are laughing, but I am serious.
No, I mean, great advice. I mean, if I never have to relive the dentistry horrors of my youth.
Yeah. I went to grad school. This has resulted in so many root canals. I don't want the same for you.
Great advice. So it looks like we've got a question in the chat. What are some other things you enjoy doing other than writing and drawing that spark creativity or make you happy?
I really like. Sorry. I really like cleaning up old bones and articulating them. So obviously, when bones kind of fall apart, when there's nothing holding them, they're nice and clean. But you can put them back together with like a little bit of wire or a little bit of glue, and it's a whole art. And it's really interesting, and I love doing it. Other things I do that make me feel pretty good and creative. So I like my favorite thing pre-pandemic was to just hang out with friends while they played video games, and I'd like sit on their couch and draw, right? And I found that the equivalent now post-pandemic is like a Twitch stream where like the streamer is someone I know or a friend of a friend, and then I can just like hang out in the chat, and it makes me feel good, it makes me feel happy, and yeah, it gets those creative juices flowing,
I love that. I'll let Emily jump in here.
I almost forgot, but I gotta mention it.
Yeah.
D&D. I love D&D so much.
You're talking to two D&D.
Both of us run D&D for the library. Nice. Yeah.
Nice.
At our branches, yeah.
Yeah. We will be doing a main feed Dungeons and Dragons program on like basics. But we can promote that at the end of it. Well,
yeah.
We're excited that you said that.
I'm glad to know y'all like it too. Yay.
Yeah. Don't get us started.
Yeah. Do we want to? I mean, we do have some questions about the bones. So
yeah.
So that's definitely something that I was planning on asking, because you mentioned at the top bones. You also mentioned it in your author bio. I may have looked at your Instagram, and it's full of awesome bones. And so, yeah, please tell us about your bone collection. And Bailey Mean asks, can you tell us about the animal skull behind you? What kind of animal is that?
I can pull it up a little bit closer, and you can take a look. Let's see. Whoop. All right. So this is a cougar. I'm gonna slowly open it. Let's see. And so one of the things I love about jawbones is they slot in so nicely in where they go, and they'll make like this very satisfying sort of, let's see. There we go. Dun, dun.
Nice.
So it makes that click. So yeah, this one I actually went with a friend to get this one, as well as my giant red deer skull, from someone in New Jersey who was selling them for really inexpensive. And I was like, it's time for Skull Quest. So we drove a few hours down and got Skull Quest started, and got skulls. It was great. So this whole thing started because so I've always thought bones are nice and interesting, but I hadn't thought of collecting them. Life being the kind of weird thing it is, my family wanted me to be a doctor. I got to med school, did not want to be a doctor, did not actually complete med school or stay. Switched to science, kind of as a sort of compromise of, all right, I won't get an MD, I'll get a PhD. It's not that I didn't enjoy the science. I liked it. I was studying dengue virus in mosquito cells. And so that's super interesting to me. But I wasn't really happy with it. And at the time, I was going to university in Texas. And Texas was not a very good place for a weird, queer, brown kid who is becoming less shy about being weird, queer, and brown, So I escaped to the first job that would have me, which was here in New York. And it was as a pet scientist for a public relations firm. And that didn't go well either, because I like having my soul. And all right, I'm almost done with this story, I promise. So that ended with me taking any job. I needed a job, even if it's a weird retail job. Yeah, I'll sign up for it. What is this? A store that sells weird dead things? Okay, yeah, I am overqualified for this, but I want to stay in New York, which is what I said in the interview. And so one of the nice things about New York is you find eccentric places like that owned by like one dude who's like, yeah, all right, oh, like the cut of your jib. Do you want to? We already hired a cashier, but do you want to be like our pet scientist? And so for about before I started working comics full time, I worked full time in this weird position as kind of like curator slash. Imagine being a museum dansant and then cross that over with retail hell. That's kind of what my job was, but it was sort of, hosting at like this store of weird dead things. And I got to know like the providers of like our weird dead things. And I got to liking certain weird dead things. Specifically, I love teeth, skulls, and bones. I think they're so pretty, and just there's like a real beauty to nature that, I don't know, it's just really nice to look at like all the curves, all the shapes, all the colors of bone, right?
That's amazing.
This is, yeah, I can listen to bone talk for forever. This is cool.
Do we have any more questions? Thank you for that, by the way. That was
yes, thank you.
Yes, I was hoping someone would ask me about bones.
Oh yeah, Lauren Spector in the chat. This is not a question. She says, if Stanley hasn't already, she needs to visit the Museum of Osteology in Oklahoma City. An amazing collection of bones.
I'm delighted. I will definitely put that on my to visit list once quarantine lets up and the vaccine.
Exactly.
Right.
It's safe to do so.
Safety first.
Yeah. They have a cool virtual exhibit.
Yes, they do.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Do we have some time for lightning round questions?
I think so.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we'll ask a few of these. All right. So first one, since you are living in New York right now, do you have a New York City bodega go-to? Like, do you have a specific bodega that you love or a specific food?
So,
Please enlighten.
so you kind of have to develop one just because that's just how it is. I have moved around a bit, and I've recently moved, so I lost my old go-to bodega. But I'm cultivating my new go-to bodega, which is right across the street. So, and the thing is, we say, "What's your bodega go-to?" But I'm like picky because I'm going to be honest, it's just a bacon, egg, and cheese because that's what it is for everyone. And there's a reason for that. And that reason is it's delicious. But it has to be from my bodega where I know they make the bacon good and crispy, not weird and thick and wobbly like you get at some places. I don't understand that, and I don't care for it. So if it is a place where their bacon is suspect or of unconfirmed value, then, I'm okay with a bagel and cream cheese and an orange juice. That's fine. I don't know if lightning round questions have to be quick, but
no, that was perfect. Thank you. I mean, we're Angelinos, so we are very, we're interested in the bodega.
Yeah, and that also just
like in New York. So thank you for clarifying the consistency of the bacon.
No worries.
Another food question. Is there a food from your childhood that you still crave?
Okay, so this is probably not a good answer, but the answer is candy. Oh, man. So I'm lucky because in New York, sometimes you can find Mexican candies, but I have to go hunting, and it's always like this one neighborhood in Brooklyn or this one neighborhood in Queens, and I'm just like, I crave the bubalubus, which are like this chocolate thing over marshmallow and like a very thick jam. I love those. And whenever I get them, my husband steals them, and I don't forgive him this. But sometimes there will be two bubalubus, and then I can share. But tamarindos and chamoys and submarinos, which are kind of like a Twinkie if a Twinkie had strawberry filling. I love that. I imagine y'all probably have good access to.
We do.
Nice.
Yeah, I've had a submarino before. It's delicious. So I know what you're talking about.
They're so good. And they're so hard to find here.
All right. So pandemic question time. What's your current TV obsession? If you watch TV.
So I do, but pandemic being what it is. So since I'm actually doing all my work digitally now, I end up listening to a lot of podcasts because my hands and eyes are busy, only brain and ears free. But so I've got a list of podcasts I'm working through. I listen to a lot of actual play podcasts because I was not joking when I said I love D&D. But I love story horror podcasts too. And I like it's kind of cheesy, but I like the ones that are just friends chatting to each other about anything. I'm like, yeah, some good chill vibes there. I do watch some TV. What We Do in the Shadows is so dang funny. I love Harvey Guillen, who plays Guillermo. In part, I admit it, because he's a chubby brown queer person too. And I don't know him, but I'm like, bien hecho, camarada, bien hecho.
I love What We Do in the Shadows, so
it's so good.
Yeah,
I hear you on all of that.
I've only seen the movie. I haven't watched the show yet. I need to watch the show.
The show is really.
You gotta.
I love it because it roasts New Yorkers. I live for every season has an episode because they're on Staten Island, and every episode has every season has an episode where they go and visit the Manhattan vampires, and I love it because it's perfect. It roasts us to a nice golden brown.
Beautiful.
Oh, I watch a lot of YouTube cooking stuff, like Sola El Wiley and Rick Martinez on YouTube. I'm terrible in the kitchen. I have been cursed by a fae to never cook anything that is better than edible technically. But I like love watching people create like these beautiful dishes that I will never be able to recreate. But maybe my husband will. Maybe maybe someday. It's just relaxing.
All right, last question. If The Hazards of Love was being adapted into a movie or TV show, what song would you pick to be the theme song?
That's really hard because I have several playlists for like the series and like specific character playlists for certain characters, which is fine. But like I gotta pick one, right? So you know how in some shows or films they'll take this one song and play different versions of it throughout the show, like a leitmotif. Yeah. If I had to pick one, it would be La Llorona, which is this classic Mexican folk song that so many people have covered in so many different ways. And like in the little soundtrack listing, I'm like, all right, so this version of La Llorona plays when during the opening credits, this one plays during the closing credits, this one plays during this confrontation, this one plays when there's like romantic tension, that sort of thing.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I think if we don't have any more questions in the chat, I'm looking. But this was amazing talking to you. Oh, yeah. You've been so interesting, and we love you. We love The Hazards of Love.
I'm so glad you liked my book.
It's so good. It comes out March 30th, so remember to pick up a copy. Look out for it then at the end of March. We will definitely have it in the library. Thank you all so much for joining us today with author and comic book artist Stan Stanley. So please make sure to check out additional programs as part of the TEENtastic Tuesdays. So next Tuesday at 4, we have Introduction to Filmmaking for Teens with the Echo Park Film Council. And we also mentioned, and they linked to it in the chat, that Vinci and I are going to be doing D&D 101 for the last TEENtastic Tuesday of this month. So that's on March 30th, the day this book comes out.
Yeah, read a spooky horror comic, learn how to play D&D.
Exactly. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Please know that I'm so happy about that. I'm like, what better way to celebrate my book coming out than knowing that people will be learning D&D?
Yeah. Thank you again to Stan. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. You've been wonderful.